Welcome to our World Environment Day special. 39% or more than one-third. That is how massive the contribution of buildings and construction activities is to energy-related carbon emissions across the world. Unfortunately, we cannot stop making homes and buildings. It's linked to human progress. But what we can do is build much more responsibly. Today, we put the spotlight on India's green building practices to understand what are we doing right and what are the big gaps. Joining me on the show, Millie Majumdar, Managing Director, GBCI India. We also have with us Mohit Malhotra, MD and CEO of Godrej Properties, and Manit Rastogi, founding partner of Morphogenesis. Before I head into the discussion with my guests, here's the good news. As a country, we rank a high fourth amongst top 10 countries in the world which are LEED certified green buildings. We are right behind just USA, Canada and China. Now, LEED is a UGBC rating, which is the most widely used green building rating system globally to measure a building's commitment to energy and water efficiency, sustainable design, material and resources, and indoor environmental quality, amongst some other, in fact, many other things. Now, India also has its own homegrown certification for green buildings under CII, known as IGBC, or the Indian Green Building Council. IGBC has set a target of 10 billion square feet of certified green buildings by 2022 for India. And according to the data they released last year, as a country, we have achieved 75% of this target with 7.17 billion square feet of green buildings. In all probability, making some allowances for the pandemic lockdown and setbacks, India should achieve the target of 10 billion in the next 1.5 years. So that's the good news. Now let me go to Mohit. Mohit, Godrej Group made a commitment back in 2010 that every building that you make and build will be certified green. Give us some highlights of this journey. How difficult has it been? Or once you're committed, it's not a tough task.
Yeah, thanks, Manisha. It's not a tough task because it's the right thing to do, and we are very committed to the green building development. Just to give you some statistics, 90% of our buildings today are green certified, and since 2013, we made a commitment that all our buildings would be minimum silver certified. So we have stuck to that commitment. 8 of our buildings are gold certified and 6 of our buildings are, platinum certified. So there is the incremental cost for developing these green buildings, but in the overall trade-off between the cost versus it being the right thing to do from a long-term perspective, we have taken a very conscious call to commit behind the green building development. And now our targets are to go even one step further in our journey.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, Millie, let me come to you. Now, statistics, we look fairly good. Responsible developers like Godrej are leading the pack when it comes to green ratings and green certified buildings. But let's go a little behind the numbers per se. The total that we're talking about, 10 billion square feet as a target, is probably not even 5% of India's total built environment, isn't it? So we still have a very long way to go.
Absolutely, Manisha, and thanks for inviting me for this show. So you are right to say that in terms of buildings that go through the formal green certification process, either with LEED or our own homegrown rating systems, are far and few in number. For example, like all put together, the total number of green certified or registered buildings would be in the tune of 12 to 13,000 numbers, and cumulatively about maybe 12 billion square foot. But I just want to qualify my statement of certified buildings with generally building green. Say India traditionally has been building green thanks to several architects who we have, who are sensitized to the fact to passive architecture and several other measures to do green. And so though we have lesser number of certified buildings, but in fact there may be more buildings that are green. And thanks also to a lot of our policy and regulatory reforms that have happened over a few years in terms of, say, environmental clearance, then the energy conservation building code being in place, or for that matter, the whole awareness about, how outdoor pollution impacts our lives, that have led to a general consciousness about building green. So I suspect, though the numbers are far and few in number, in terms of statistically, but I'm sure there will be many more buildings that are, incorporating green measures. But,
Right.
We would like to come back to one point later on, that are they really performing?
Are we really performing? Okay, I'm going to come back to that, but Manit, overall the numbers. Now, even that number that we're talking about, whether it's a IGBC target of 10 billion, or as Millie says, that if we count the rest of them which are not certified or certified by other agencies, it could be a 12 to 13 billion number. Most of it seems to be focused on India's office and commercial segment and large developers who are getting their building certified, isn't it? What happens to 75% of the market, which is residential homes?
That's true. And the reason for that, Manisha, is that a lot of the tenants who occupy these buildings are international MNC tenants, because the bulk of it is IT, and they have a prerequisite for it being a green building, which is why a lot of the developers have gone ahead and done that. In the case of residential, the drive really isn't there, and which is really 75% of the construction market. And the reason for that is that the buyer of an apartment is more interested in the location, the size of the apartment, and the cost, rather than the green features. And largely also because, a lot of our homes are hybrid. We don't switch the ACs on all the time. We don't switch the light. But we are, by very nature, as Indians, we're very conservative in how we consume our energy and how we consume our water.
Okay.
The only reason there is a drive is because of additional deciding offered by certain states. It's a bit counterproductive, because we're trying to save energy and allowing someone to build more. What would be better off would be if they, like they've done for cars, say that at 10 years, you have a green tax. So buildings that are not have a tax, that tax should go into certifying buildings for free, rather than having to pay for it.
Very interesting. Mohit, would you agree? I mean, most of the states are actually giving extra FAR if you have green certified projects, and this includes residential as well. Do you think that maybe looking at the fact that if we need to meet our Paris climate agreement goals of reducing environment warming, climate change, we need to actually get to net zero, maybe go to taxing non-green buildings? Is that something that will get us faster on the path?
Yeah, I think you're right. Government has to play a critical role, because the pull from consumer side isn't there, for paying for these extra costs for these buildings. So government, intervention would definitely help, whether it's on positive side, like Manit was saying about giving some additional FAR for green buildings, or, even if that's not possible, simple things like, giving faster approvals for green buildings, faster MOEF approvals from green buildings is also a big incentive for developers. And also, I think, negative measures could be also taken, but I think positive measures would be better and, would incentivize the market towards green building. So I think clearly huge role government can play in this direction.
When you say that, all your buildings are certified, these are residential projects as well, isn't it, Mohit?
These are, bulk of our projects, or 90% of our projects are residential. So I've been talking about residential projects. All our commercial projects are actually platinum certified.
Millie, let me come to you. You spoke about the fact that there is, of course, one is a number of how many certified green building square footage we have in the country. And the second is the actual performance of these buildings. I mean, is anyone really auditing them once certified?
Yes, so that's the big gap that we have in the certification space, that often, the performance is not recorded and reported, and also conveyed to the building occupants that how the building is performing, that has been designed to green. So it's very critical. So one of the, the major reason why this gap happens is that the design team and the operating team are different, So maybe the architect and the designer has put several principles in place, but when it comes to operations, they may not be aware. I'll take some simple examples of, like I had been part of several maybe random audits into green certified spaces. So just to give a few examples, a solar PV system that was installed in a residential property in a municipality that offered incentive for green certified building. So after they received the incentive, they took up the Resident Welfare Association was unable to maintain it. There is a maintenance cost. They sold it out. And there was so they would have got incentive and a green certification based on that. Then it's not operating. Similar things happens, things happen with, say, the sewage treatment plant. The Resident Welfare Association does not maintain it, or they don't know. And similarly on the commercial side, many a times we find in random audits that the air quality is, missing. The building operators shut off the fresh air intake in order to save energy, and resulting in high concentration of, say, carbon dioxide. So I think it's very, very critical that green buildings are measured and maintained on all parameters if they have to be really functioning for the people for whom they are made.
Absolutely. In fact, there's been this whole controversy also. For example, Tamil Nadu was one of the states which came up with a rainwater harvesting policy, saying that everything that you build must have those rainwater harvesting pits around them, right? And the system, but most of them are clogged and they're not working. Manit, my question is that, I mean, how in a country as vast as India with so many individual homes, I mean, what developers actually represent is a very small pie yet of India's housing market, isn't it? What do you do then? I mean, other than tax, how do you actually audit these buildings? We don't have the manpower.
No, that's very true, Manisha. But, at the end of the day, what are we looking at? We're looking at energy consumption and we're looking at water consumption. Now, it's a question of putting data analytics to work. How much energy is consumed is metered. How much water is supplied to any residential development, whether it's private or by a developer, is also metered. All the government had to do was deploy advanced data analytics in seeing how consumption happens apartment by apartment, house by house, across a certain area, across the state, across the country. That information is readily available. They will immediately be able to come up with a methodology of making recommendations of where is energy being overconsumed or underconsumed, or by simple analytics. So it's not really complicated. The data is all there. It's metered. You pay for it. So if there is a benefit scheme for someone who is consuming lesser energy per capita, we know how many people live in a home, but that we have a population census that allows that, then we can reward that. If there is a lot of consumption, we can check that too. So it's a question of deploying technology, maybe combining it with the GIS system and overlaying it with the population census to see how do you begin to report low consumption. So rather than only relying on ratings, which only really deal with buildings and not with people, it would be far more prudent to start rewarding people for behavior which is green.
Okay. Mohit, what about audits? I mean, do you have regular audits? Large developers also have commitment to their financials. They have their ESG, environment, social and governance, measurements that they need to meet. How often do you audit the buildings after they've been certified?
Yeah, we have a regular audit process, both during the construction and post that as well. If I have to just give you mentioned ESG, we have been following ESG and there is a global real estate sustainability benchmark called GRESB, where, we are actually the global leader in the listed real estate space with a score of 94. So there is a huge commitment there. By default, one needs to measure these various metrics which are presented in the data. We are also working on doing ISO certification on all our sites, both for safety and health and also for environment management systems, which again by default would mean regular audit. So if you have to make these changes, measurement is part of it. Last year what we did was we introduced ESG goals in the entire management teams. So every person in the organization today has ESG goals which are measured, and their specific performance is kind of measured around these metrics. So I think it has to be comprehensive if we have to really make an
Make a
impact on
difference.
this.
The pandemic has also forced us to ask a very important question. How do we make our buildings more healthy, better ventilated, and the air conditioning system more virus proof? When we come back, we'll focus on that. Once the pandemic lockdowns end, many of us will head back into offices, and the biggest concern on everyone's mind is how do we reoccupy a building safely? COVID-19 has thrown up one of the biggest challenges of upgrading ventilation systems and air conditioning to ensure healthier indoor spaces. So, Millie, I'm going to come to you. How do you actually ventilate offices which probably don't even have any windows which can be opened? I mean, they've all been built to insulate against the heat that this country faces and just preserve air conditioning.
Yes, absolutely, Manisha, and that's spot on. So not only, we need to look at how offices can be made more healthier and greener. We also need to look at, the residential spaces where we are, now most of the times we're working out of home, and there is a need for, adaptable spaces, reusable spaces, isolation spaces, better ventilation, daylighting. So I think, along with, so there's a very critical aspect which COVID-19 has taught us, that we need to be not only looking at healthier buildings, but also at resilience. So resilience is another aspect that has to be built into our dialogue about buildings. So resilient, green, healthy.
It's such a vague term though. I've never understood this resilience of a building. What does it really mean? I understand buildings last for 40 to 100 years, but I find resilience as a word very vague.
Yes, so absolutely, so resilience, in simple terms, suppose when immediately we were asked to shut ourselves at homes, we didn't know, where do we do our physical activities, where do we go and buy our daily needs, where do we interact, communicate. But think about it, if we had, say, green spaces within walking distances, access to, say, quality non-motorable transport, basic needs within our, reach, etc., we would have been much more, mentally agile and healthier as a community. And the entire society wouldn't have gone through this mental turmoil. So it's very important for us to, shift this communication about buildings, societies, communities to be resilient from the social aspect. And there are many concepts,
Okay, fair enough. I mean, somewhere I've understood a little bit. Okay, Manit, indoor, let's just stick to making indoor spaces of offices as people return back to office and lockdowns get over. How do we ventilate them? How do we make them healthier?
So, Manisha, this is not complicated, okay? And there have been several objections by tenants, by offices that there's a lot of pollution, mosquitoes, etc. However, it's all easily dealable with. For example, number one, we need to start designing interior spaces for offices without any encapsulated space, which essentially means get rid of the false ceilings, try and make shaftless buildings, any spaces that are inaccessible. We can do interior design of offices that don't have that. That's a starting point. Second, allow for night purge. What is night purge? If you don't want to open your windows, at least allow for the entire office to be flushed out at night. It's a very old technique that we used to do in our homes 100 years back, 50 years back. You open the entire home out, and then when the night temperatures are lesser than day temperatures, it cools down and it lets the fresh air, it's called a night purge. So you can do that. During the day, now we have, the building has to be mechanically fully ventilated, the evacuation system that you can add to allow for the fact that you don't get virus load as you're speaking. However, there's a fundamental flaw in air conditioning design. You let the cold air drop from the top of a duct, and you suck the cold air back, slightly warmer air back up into another duct. So the supply air is cleaner, and the return air, which is probably contaminated, are both mixing. A simple solution to fix that is supply the air from the bottom and you suck it out from the top with a one-way loop. And that solves pretty much most of the problem of the virus load for interior air quality.
Okay, interesting. Are you thinking in those directions, Mohit, for a return of people into the Godrej? I mean, platinum rated, fantastic, but internal health is now a big focus, and air conditioning system specifically.
No, you're right. I think this is an issue which obviously is on top of mind for everyone, and for us, safety of our employees as well as tenants is paramount. So we are looking at all solutions to mitigate this risk. Obviously, the current buildings are designed to the best possible capabilities, given the fact that they are platinum rated. But any other technology solutions which can come in handy are being explored to help on this.
All right. I think we've completely run out of time. I'm going to thank all my guests here, Mohit, Manit and Millie. Thank you very much for joining me. I mean, we basically touched the tip of the conversation, but at least it's a start. And I'm going to sign off with one thought. We are way past the time for constructing incrementally better green and sustainable buildings. Unless we aim for net zero carbon buildings, we are unlikely to meet the Paris Agreement goals of keeping global warming to less than 2 degrees by 2050. So we have a long journey and something that we have to do very, very fast ahead of us. Thank you so much for watching.